So I wanted to let you know a little something about sabbatical. And so I'm going to read a poem that I think represents what this meant to me, what this time meant to me. It's called Fire by Judy Brown. What makes a fire burn is the space between the logs, a breathing space. Too much of a good thing, too many logs packed in too tight, can douse the flames almost as surely as a pail of water would. So building fires requires attention to the spaces in between as much as to the wood. When we're able to build open spaces in the same way we have learned to pile on the logs, then we can come to see how it is fuel and the absence of fuel together that make fire possible. We only need to lay a log lightly from time to time. A fire grows simply because the space is there, with openings in which the flame that knows just how it wants to burn can find its way. So I needed some space because I had piled on those logs. And they were all good logs. They were all great, but they were piled on, and I was not finding the space for the breath, for the air. So I needed to take that space. And Spirit reinforced that for me. It was funny how Spirit shows up. The second day of my vacation, I took a vacation with my friend Janet, who has been my friend since junior high. And she loves to gamble. And so I went to visit a friend for dinner, and then I was going to pick her up at the pepper mill. And so I did. I stopped at the pepper mill and went inside. And of course, the pepper mill is a beautiful place. It has these giant screens on the wall that have pictures of beautiful places. Venice, South Yuba River, China, all of these things. So she was saying, just a minute, I have to, just a few more, hours here. Anyway, so I wandered around looking at the beautiful pictures, looking at these beautiful videos, occasionally tuning into the Warriors game. And then I saw a man walk by with a t-shirt on, and the t-shirt said, "Slow down so your soul can catch up." And I knew that that was one of those little God winks. One of those little, do you get it? Do you get it? And I also got wisdom when I was on the trail. We went up to the ridge at Tahoe the second week, and I took a hike along the Tahoe Ridge Trail and saw beautiful flowers, and it was just lovely. And another couple was coming towards me and past me, and I was listening to their conversation, and the gentleman said, she said, "Well, you're in good shape." And he said, "Well, I learned to stop eating when I wasn't hungry, not when I was full." I learned to stop eating when I wasn't hungry, not when I was full. And I thought, that's an interesting thing to notice. Am I eating until I'm full? Which I was. So it let me realize that I could stop eating when I wasn't hungry anymore. And that was a little, wisdom. I mean, Spirit is all around us all the time, giving us little messages if we're open, if we're willing to listen, if we just open our eyes and take it in. So our theme this month is loving kindness and forgiveness. And today we're talking about the courage to be forgiving. Now, what is forgiveness? Well, I'd like to start out by explaining what it isn't. Forgiveness is, I forgot to tell you, the book this month is The Art of Forgiveness, Loving Kindness and Peace by Jack Kornfield, who is a wonderful Buddhist teacher at Spirit Rock in Marin County. And we have a organizational design model in the Centers for Spiritual Living that says we see a worldwide culture in which forgiveness is the norm. In which forgiveness is the norm. That means we automatically go to forgiveness. So when we say forgiveness, it is not reconciliation. It might lead to reconciliation, but it's not reconciliation. It's not atonement. It might lead to that, but it's not atonement. It's not forgetting. Forgive and forget? It's not forgetting. It's not losing the knowledge we've gained from whatever happened. And it doesn't mean that we don't prosecute someone to the highest extent of the law if they have wronged us in a way that violated our communal laws. So it doesn't mean any of those things. But one of the definitions that Jack Kornfield uses is, forgiveness is giving up all hope of having a better past. It's giving up all hope of having a better past. And of course, whenever I'm doing something like this, I always get an opportunity to forgive myself. So I was driving home from Asilomar. I wasn't actually driving home. I was driving to a friend's in Marin County. I was going to visit that I haven't seen for a couple of years. And so I stopped in Daly City to get some gas and to relieve myself because it had been a couple of hours on the road already. And in the process, I got out of there and made it across the bridge and had dinner, and then the next day we went to lunch together, and I went to pull out my credit card, and it wasn't there. I had left it at the gas station. And so where did I go? Well, I went to anger, and I went to that Chevron station. They took my card. They didn't let me just put it in and slide it. I had to insert it, and then it ate it for a while, and then I was, and so it's their fault. They ate my credit card. How was I to know when it was going to come out? And besides, I had to run to the restroom, and by the time I ran back, people were lined up to get into this gas station, so I just jumped in my car and zoomed off, and blah, 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 blame and anger and all the other resentment, just going all those places for a little while, for a very short while. And by the time we walked to the car, I took a breath and I said, happened in the past, can't do a thing about it. What am I going to do now? And, part of me was going like, I don't know, I don't have the number to cancel the credit card, blah, blah, blah. My friend said, what kind of a card was it? I said, it was a Chase card. She said, there's a Chase Bank right over here. So, dropped me off at the Chase Bank, went in, boom, done. Canceled the credit card. No other charges had been made. I ended up calling I had the receipt, so I called the gas station. They had the card. Someone had turned it in. And so I just asked them to cut it up because it was no longer valid, and end of story. But I had to forgive myself for the human failing of not taking my credit card out of the pump machine. And, we have to do that a lot. And so the important thing is to forgive ourselves quickly and easily as we can, to practice that. At Karen Drucker's retreat last weekend, she said when she hears somebody beating themselves up, she says, drop and give me 20. Now, she doesn't mean to drop and give her 20 sit-ups or push-ups or something. She says, give me 20 things that are good about you. Give me 20 things that are great about you. Tell me 20 things that are wonderful about you. And so that's a good reminder to say, okay, I made a mistake, and I also am kind, and I'm a good friend, and I'm, all of these other things too. All of this good. I'm all that. Cornfield tells a story about a tribe in Africa where if somebody commits a transgression or is unjust or something like that, they take him into the center of the circle of the tribe. Everybody comes, and they all tell him about all the good things that they remember that he's done. And they do that for as long as they can remember, with as much clarity and detail as they can remember about what wonderful things this person has done. And it could go on for like days while they do this. And at the end of it, it's like, okay, you're back in the tribe. That's what they do. They remind that person, they may have failed here, they may have had a transgression, but that's not who they are. This is who they are. All of these good things is who they are. So we have to remember all of these good things that we are. Cornfield says, finding a way to extend forgiveness to ourselves is one of our most essential tasks. One of the things that happens when we remember something that we haven't forgiven is we think about it, and as we think about it, we remember it with not only the thought, but the emotion that accompanies that thought. And when we do that, that emotion triggers a chemical reaction in our body. It triggers a thing called glutamate. And the glutamate in the amygdala, in our brain, it sets off a signal to the adrenal glands that causes them to send out cortisol and adrenaline. And then it also releases glucose into the bloodstream. So we start wiring ourselves up in the stress mode that we experienced when we had that original activity, when that original event occurred. We reactivate it in our mind. And when we do that frequently, we are creating neural pathways in our brain, and we get addicted to our own chemicals. We get addicted to our own chemical release. We get addicted to our own adrenaline. We get addicted to our own glucose release. We get addicted to these things. And then we keep telling that story over and over and over until everybody's sick of it. And, but we're addicted to that thought. We're addicted to that thing that happened to us. It was a terrible thing. Of course it was a terrible thing. And we have to tell the story initially. We have to tell the story to process it. We have to get help to process it. We have to get others to assist us through the process. I mean, during this last month, we had that whole Stanford rape case. And I don't know if you read that letter, but I did. And this person talked about the whole experience. Now, if the telling of the experience could be helpful for others, that's one thing. But if it's just because we're trying to reactivate the blame, shame, and regret all over and over again, it's not helpful, it's not useful, it's not creative, it's not life-giving. And we are all about that which is life-giving. So, I have to tell you another story, and this is an amazing story. Once on the train from Washington to Philadelphia, I found myself seated next to an African-American man who had worked for the State Department in India but had quit to run a rehabilitation program for juvenile offenders in the District of Columbia. Most of the youths he worked with were gang members who had committed homicide. One 14-year-old boy in his program had shot and killed an innocent teenager to prove himself to his gang. At the trial, the victim's mother sat impassively silent until the end, when the youth was convicted of the killing. After the verdict was announced, she stood up slowly, stared directly at him, and stated, "I'm going to kill you." Then the youth was taken away to serve several years in a juvenile facility. After the first half year, the mother of the slain child went to visit his killer. He had been living on the streets before the killing, and she was the only visitor he'd had. For a time they talked, and when she left, she gave him some money for cigarettes. Then she started step by step to visit him more regularly, bringing him food and small gifts. Near the end of his 3-year sentence, she asked him what he would be doing when he got out. He was confused and very uncertain, so she offered to set him up with a job at a friend's company. Then she inquired about where he would live, and since he had no family to return to, she offered him temporary use of a spare room in her home. For 8 months he lived there, ate her food, worked at the job. Then one evening she called him into the living room to talk. She sat down opposite him and waited. Then she started. "Do you remember in the courtroom when I said I was going to kill you?" "I sure do," he replied. "Well, I did," she went on. "I did not want the boy who could kill my son for no reason to remain alive on this earth. I wanted him to die. That's why I started to visit you and bring you things. That's why I got you the job and let you live here in my house. That's how I set about changing you. And that old boy, he's gone. So now I want to ask you, since my son is gone and that killer is gone, if you'll stay here. I've got room, and I'd like to adopt you, if you'll let me." And she became the mother of her son's killer, the mother he never had. Now, that is a tale that goes beyond forgiveness, obviously. That goes into a real realization that these kinds of actions are caused by ignorance. Our biggest enemy, if we have one, is ignorance. We could all realize that there is something going on here that we don't understand. Something that is being called for healing. The Course in Miracles says everything is either a call for love or an expression of love, no exceptions. Everything is either a call for love or an expression of love, no exceptions. And so in that story, we see the power of love to heal. That to accept this young man into her home and into her life as a replacement for her son. I mean, wow. What kind of love and oneness and acceptance is that? Henry Wadsworth Longfellow said, if we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should see sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility. If we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should see the sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility. But when we're stuck in unforgiveness, when we know that there's a person who's that story, every time we tell it, we reactivate it. The question is, how do we let that person or event have harmless passage through our mind? That's what we have to let it do. Have harmless passage through our mind. In other words, it no longer brings up the emotion. It no longer triggers the chemical reaction. How do we do that? We feel what's happening in our body. We go beyond the story and just recognize what it's doing in our body. We feel where it is. Is it in our gut? Is it in our head? Is it in our neck? Is it in our back? Where is the pain coming from? Where is it settling? What is it activating? And when we can do that, we can breathe into that place and release it. Breathe and release. Breathe and release. So I just invite us together. I'm going to say a few things, and I would love it if you would repeat it after me. I breathe in peace.
I breathe in peace.
And breathe out pain.
And breathe out pain.
I breathe in freedom.
I breathe in freedom.
And breathe out constriction.
And breathe out constriction.
I breathe in love.
I breathe in love.
And breathe out hatred.
And breathe out hatred.
I breathe in light.
I breathe in light.
And breathe out darkness.
And breathe out darkness.
I breathe in forgiveness.
I breathe in forgiveness.
And breathe out blame and victimhood.
And breathe out blame and victimhood.
Take a deep breath. Forgiveness allows us to reclaim the energy that we had tied up in that past experience. When we are thinking about that past, we can't drive looking in the rearview mirror, can we? So we have to look ahead, and in order to reclaim that energy that is tied to the past, we have to practice that forgiveness. We have to practice that release for ourselves. It's all about us releasing our own imprisonment. There was a Zen story about this monk, and this person came to the monk and said, I cannot forgive. What shall I do? And the monk jumped up and he ran out of the room and he grabbed a pillar and he was hanging onto the pillar and they said, help, help, release me from this pillar. Help me, I can't get away from this pillar. And the person came out and said, I thought you were a wise man. All you have to do is let go. And the wise man said, that's what we have to do. Have to let go. Forgiveness and compassion are not sentimental. They're not weak. They require courage and integrity. They alone can bring about the peace we all long for. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, which is a Hindu story, if you want to see the heroic, look at those who can love in return for hatred. If you want to see the brave, look for those who can forgive. So since we're celebrating the 4th of July, we're celebrating freedom. Forgiveness is freedom. So let us say our affirmation together that's on page 2 of your bulletin. Our affirmation is, I value my freedom enough to forgive. 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 And so it is.